What happens when your worst fear becomes your reality? Hi, I'm Brent Cassidy. Welcome to the Nightmare Success In and Out podcast, where we explore how to overcome your fears and nightmares and set yourself free. We're going to be exploring this topic with guys I was in Leavenworth with and others who survived their own nightmare. These stories can be inspiring, sometimes sad. There's some humor, but hopefully you can come away with a nugget of something that'll help you knock down some of the prisons you built up in your own mind. All right, welcome back, Nightmare Success In and Out listeners. This is where you come for what happens when your worst fear becomes your reality. How do you adapt, survive, overcome, set yourself free? Don't forget to follow, subscribe, share, like, all those things. It really helps the show. Folks, I am so excited about this interview. You know, if you like incredible comeback stories, pull up a chair because I have one of the most inspiring stories I've heard. Tarra Simmons, my guest, she had a troubled childhood. She was kicked out of middle school at 13 and was pregnant by 14. She found her way back to school. She graduated high school. She graduated college with a degree in nursing. Tarra fell into and relapsed back into substance abuse, which eventually led her to be sentenced to a 30-month prison sentence. Her comeback story is unreal. When she got out, Tarra went to law school. She graduated magna cum laude, top of her class. Then she had to fight with the Washington State Bar just to be admitted as an attorney. She didn't give up when they said they would admit her. And she had friends and support. And Tarra took her case to the Supreme Court in Washington. And she won. And she became an attorney. She started doing great things as an attorney, and then she was talked into running for politics as a Washington State representative and won. She is an incredible, strong role model, voice for everything reentry as a lawyer, a state representative, a speaker, an author. She's the first formerly incarcerated Washington State representative. I cannot wait to jump in to this story, but before we do, I want to recognize our show sponsor, who likes to spend a couple of weekends walking car lots, looking for a car. Then you spend 4 or 5 hours in the dealership to buy a car. It's kind of like a root canal appointment. Well, there's a better way to take away all that pain and hassle of getting a car. It's called Auto Plaza Direct. They are your personal car concierge. Just tell them the car you want, what you can pay, and they'll go find that car for you. They'll negotiate your best price. They also offer you warranties and financing. It's all full service. Go to autoplazadirect.com to get started with your personal car concierge. The new hassle-free way, the car buying experience you deserve. Auto Plaza Direct. Tell them Brent from Nightmare Success sent you. Tarra Simmons, thanks so much for being here today and making time. So appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you for doing this.
I've been so excited to do this interview because it's these type of stories that just get to your soul of understanding what it takes to get knocked down, to hit rock bottom, to get back up. It's not easy getting back up, but you still get through it. And then you get to that other side and it feels so good. But I want you to take us back a little bit because it wasn't always easy and nothing's been easy. I'm sure what you're doing right now is not easy.
No.
What was your world like growing up as a kid? Because I know that reading through this, there were struggles.
Yeah. Yeah, as a kid, it was, I didn't know any different, but now that I look back, it was, I lived in extreme poverty. My father was a crack addict. My mom and him separated when I was a year old, and I went back and forth between the two of them. So my mom was a, raging alcoholic for all my life and not really able to nurture me. And then I would go to my father and he was a crack addict. And, when I lived with him in California in Stockton, it was really rough because that's where I was exposed to a lot of gang violence and gun violence and drug deals, very early on. I have a scar on my ankle. My father is Latino also, and he was being chased by the police when I was 9. And I have a scar on my ankle from when I fell when the police was chasing us. And it's just really, really a bad childhood. And
Sarah, how old would you have been when that happened?
How old what?
How old would you have been when that happened, when you were running from the police and scarred your ankle?
9 years old.
Wow.
Yeah, they were actually chasing my father, but I was with him. So
Right.
I
It
was
felt
running too.
probably
Like,
like they were chasing you.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And so, that's just, how I grew up is in really rough neighborhoods. And, uh, police were never supportive of me. I was a victim of crime very early, sexual abuse, trafficking. And I never felt like they were supportive of me or helpful, or the system did not help me. Right. But it harmed my family and I a lot.
Yeah.
um, and just generational poverty. My father got his GED and the California Youth Authority, but I was the first person ever in my family to graduate from high school at
Did you have
16.
siblings, Tara?
I have two brothers
Okay.
from my father who were younger, and they were taken away and in foster care. And then I have a sister from my mother. Um, and so my mother was an alcoholic, so it was a little bit not as bad as far as criminal legal system involvement, but still not a healthy environment
No.
to develop as a child.
No. I can't imagine.
Yeah.
So you're in that world and you don't really know anything different. How did it come to you to when you dropped out of middle school? Was it all the other kids that you were with in your group? Did they do the same thing, or how did that happen?
Yeah, pretty much. I actually got expelled. I got my first violent offense, assault in the second degree, a strike, when I was 13. And really, what it was about is trying to fit in with my peers who were in gangs. And I, beat up a random girl just to kind of prove that I was tough and down
Hmm.
with the gangs and all of this stuff at 13 years old. And I, broke her ribs, and I feel really bad about that today, but I was 13. I was lost. I was looking for a sense of belonging that I didn't have in a family. And I think, the other young people I was around were also looking for that, and um, really didn't have any guidance or direction. And so I've had to learn to forgive myself for that. But I do feel bad. I'd like to find her one day and hope that she's okay. But so yeah, I got expelled. I was 13. I went to juvenile detention at that time for 50 days. And I had been in juvenile detention before for stealing food because my father would sell our food stamps for crack cocaine. Um, but yeah, that was the longest time I had spent in juvenile detention at that time.
Wow. I think it's interesting in your story, though. You ended up getting pregnant at 14, had the baby at 15, but then you find your way back into graduating high school. How did
Yeah.
all that come and evolve?
Well, when I got pregnant, I was 14. I was living in a park, and I got really,
Homeless?
really sick. I was really sick. And so I went to the hospital and found out that I was septic. Like, I had a kidney infection that had gotten into my blood. So I was in
That
there for
kills
like,
most people, by the way.
so I was
Septic.
like, I was in there for 5 days, and that's when I found out I was pregnant as well. And I was 14, and the social worker at the hospital, came to me and said, you can get on welfare. And, so I did. I went to DSHS, I got on welfare, and then I was able to get housing. And I remember on my 15th birthday, I signed the lease on my studio apartment, and it had cockroaches, and it was $300 a month, and I got like $349 a month from welfare.
Wow.
But you know what? It was the first time I felt safe. Like, I had a door that would close and lock, and I was safe. I was off the streets. And so, during my pregnancy, going to the OBGYN and then connecting with social services, child protection services got involved. They were concerned, a
Sure.
15-year-old having a baby on her own,
Yeah.
doesn't have family support. And, they, let me keep my child, but they said, these are the things that you have to do in order to keep your child. You need to get back in school. You can't have any men at your apartment. You cannot drink alcohol. You can't do this. And I was so in love with my baby that
Hmm.
I would do anything, and I wanted him to have a better life. And so because I had, some support from systems, and helped me get to school and stuff, paid my bus fare and things. And then the school had an alternative school. They had a child care center there. I was able to go back to school and complete all 4 years in 1 year,
Wow.
because I was always like academically gifted and smart, and I could get through. If you tell me what I need to do, I can do it.
No, I
But
can tell that's followed you all the way through, Tara.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
that's a protective factor, that's been helpful for me. But yeah, I did all 4 years in 1 year. I graduated high school at 16. I was the first person in my entire family for generations to ever graduate from high school. So,
So what was your next step?
well, I didn't know anybody that went to college. I didn't know about Pell Grants. I didn't know about financial aid, but it was random that a neighbor told me about it. And he told me the thing that motivated me to go to college was that I would get Pell Grants and it would cover my tuition and books, but then I would get money back and it wouldn't affect my welfare, and I could buy my son shoes with it.
Wow.
So that's how immature I was at that time. And the motivation for going to school was really financial. But once I got there at community college at 16, I met other people who, just had healthier lives and other goals. And then I started dreaming. And I started dreaming about what I wanted to do.
That's interesting, Tara, because that was maybe the first time that you had run into other people in a different type of group that had aspirations to do something with their life. You just knew the streets and what you'd been around,
Mm-hmm.
but you attached yourself to that felt right or felt like something that you wanted.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you do that. You go to the community college, you get your nursing degree,
Mm-hmm.
and you're a nurse, which is a great occupation.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how do things step into the next step of your life?
Well, I went to community college and then I transferred to the university and got my bachelor's degree and became a nurse. And I thought like I had overcame everything because I had a career and I was, earning money, and I had a house. I bought a house.
You wouldn't have been that old then, right?
Yeah, I was like 21.
Yeah, 21
when
years
I bought
old.
a house, and my son was healthy and happy and clean and cute, and everything was going well. But it was in my personal life where I was still struggling to find belonging, connection. Like I never felt like I really fit in with people who didn't have a trauma history like mine,
Mm-hmm.
but the people who had trauma histories like mine weren't healthy.
Yeah.
But I still, and I still to this day, like, connect more with people who have trauma histories.
Trauma.
I just,
Yeah.
if I meet people, and this was the case then, that, had like privileged lives and a regular mom and dad and stuff, I just felt like I wasn't maybe good enough to be their friends, or they, didn't understand me and my life challenges. And so it was always hard for me to connect with people. And that would play out in intimate partner relationships as well.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, I kept, like wanting to date men who were kind of like in gangs and
The
still
bad boys.
kind of with that mentality, and they were abusive to me, but I didn't know my worth, and I didn't know that I was okay just the way I was. It's taken a long time and a lot of therapy to get to a place where I'm okay by myself. And if anyone's coming in my life, they're going to add to it. And if they're not, I'm going to end it and I'll be okay. Right.
Yeah.
It took a long time and a lot of therapy for me to get healthy. But, being around those circumstances, I definitely had interactions with law enforcement again. Even though I was a registered nurse, I got an assault charge again when I was 23, and I was a nurse because I, had a gangster boyfriend, and, things went bad. And then, eventually my father died, and my, I just was unhappy in life. And I did end up, getting married to someone who was just for financial security and like wanting stability, but I was just unsatisfied in life, and my father died. and my aunt had come over and she was using methamphetamine. And once I tried that drug, I was hooked. It was like, oh, I can't go to sleep yet because I've been up for 2 days. I need to stay awake. I need to do this and I need to do that. And so
Yeah.
that drug, I was so addicted. It really ruined my life very quickly. Within 10 months, I was in prison on a 30-month sentence. But, I had already been in juvenile justice, foster care, jail, and now I was in prison. And so that was in
What
2011.
actually, Tara, I'm kind of interested in how, in that time in your life, being caught up in, I mean, I have just interviewed Damon West, who was a star football player and in Texas. And the next thing you know, he, got a bad injury, lost his identity, and somebody gave him meth and his whole life changed, and he got a gigantic sentence. And now he's a great speaker and is changing the world. But that meth thing really, some people, they can take that and it totally takes over their whole life. But when that happened to you, when you were arrested, was it a surprise thing, or was it something where they knocked down the door and it was part of, how did that come about?
Yeah, so I actually was arrested 3 times within the 10 months of starting the meth. So I started in November 2010, and I was arrested in July for shoplifting, boosting with a bunch of other people. And then in August, again, for boosting with a bunch of other people. I was out on PR.
Yeah.
So then I had to get bailed out for that. And then in September, they had done some controlled buys on me. I had sold some of the pain medication that I was being prescribed to somebody in order to get money to get the meth. And then they had controlled buys. So they raided where I was staying at this apartment. They raided my car. They raided the place I was staying, and charged me with the delivery for the controlled buys. Tried to get me to cooperate with police and go do controlled buys on somebody bigger. And I said, no, I'm not doing that. So, they gave it to me and, charged me with possession with intent because I had, marijuana that was like packaged up, and then unlawful possession of a firearm for a gun that was in the trunk of my rental car that wasn't mine. But,
It happens.
Mm-hmm.
So when you get this sentence, you've got all kinds of different things going on. You're a nurse, you're a mother. What's going through your mind on all the things that are happening all in your world at that moment?
I mean, at first it was just like extreme depression and fear, and powerlessness, but the powerlessness kind of helped me get into surrender.
Yeah.
And I think that surrender and that powerlessness is what really helped me find recovery and find hope. And once you're so far down and there's nothing you can do about it, there's nowhere to go but up from there.
Yeah.
And so when I got transferred to the prison, I recognized that I was powerless, and I, just started going to different volunteer programs, different faith programs, recovery programs, anything to better myself or to learn about myself. And I started to unpack, how did I get here?
Yeah.
I started to heal, and I realized that I was carrying a lot of shame that didn't belong to me. A lot of things that weren't my fault from when I was a child, and that I was okay, who I am, and that I am someone who has a lot to contribute to the world. And
well, I know one of the things that you talked about, Tara, from your speech last month, was that by getting into that community, because it really is a community. Like one of the things that I always talk about, I was scared to death to go to prison, who isn't? But the people that you find in prison, I guess that was my biggest surprise. There were good people in there. And one of the things you talked about is that you found a community of people that were sharing stories that you could relate to, and it created hope for yourself that this community was something that where you became more aware that you could do something more. And I think that's interesting that you found that in prison.
Yeah. I mean, helping other women who were navigating their family law issues and their custody issues. I was probably one of the more educated people in the prison because I did have a bachelor's degree, and I,
Yeah.
have always been able to navigate resources and learn and help. And my heart's always been to help others. So I think, in prison, I found some purpose in helping other women with issues. And I, had a little more support. I had some money in a 401k, and I had a friend who was able to access that so they could send me, it was like $20 a phone call, though. It was so expensive,
Oh yeah.
um,
That's one of
but
those hidden things that no one knows about the prison
mhm,
system. It just costs so much just to
I
stay
know.
connected to your family, or the
Yeah.
costs. I was 4.5 hours away. Just the cost of travel and whatever, just to come visit and all those different things.
Mhm.
But yeah, the phone calls.
Yeah.
That's a whole thing that cost a lot of money just to stay in touch.
Yeah. Very, very much. And so, and there was these law students that were coming to the prison, and they were helping us learn about the law and our rights around our family law cases. And it's not just the criminal record; it's then family law, child custody. It's fines and fees. It's your credit that's ruined if you can't make payments, and everything goes into collections. It is my nursing license. It
Hmm.
was all of these other legal issues that I was
Hmm.
navigating while I was in prison, and these law students were helping me. And I met them, and I met people in recovery. And so, when I got out, I was able to connect with all of them, and um, they kind of helped me, piece my life back together by both overcoming my own legal issues, getting child custody, getting my bankruptcy done. I had a house that was foreclosed on. I was getting evicted from it. So these lawyers were helping me. And I was working at Burger King, and I was making $9 an hour, and I was not able to afford housing, shoes for my kids, all those
Yeah.
things. And they were garnishing my paycheck to pay my fines and fees.
Yeah.
And, I started to think about, could I just sell drugs and not use them? And, how can I
How can I get
survive?
money?
Yeah, how can I get money? And, even the thoughts of that just scared me
Hmm.
because I never wanted to experience the pain of being away from my kids again.
Yeah.
And so that's what inspired me to use the number that a law student had given me when I was in prison to call a law professor who helped people become lawyers, even if they had a criminal record. And then in my nursing support group that I was in to keep my nursing license, someone had told me about the book by Sean Hopwood called The Lawman,
Yeah.
and he happened to be a second year law student really close to my home at that time. And so I went and met with him.
And for those who don't know, Sean Hopwood became kind of famous from the standpoint he was on 60 Minutes, and he became a Georgetown law professor, and he's got quite the story. I mean, he went through the Supreme Court from the prison. Um, Very smart guy, but I've also heard great stories about Sean, who's helped other people. There was Adam Clausen, who was on my show.
Yeah.
He was sentenced to 213 years in prison, and Adam's out, and it's because of Sean Hopwood and what he did for him. And before we get into to your step of going into law school, because I think it's so incredible your story from there, Tara. I want to recognize the other show sponsor, White Collar Support Group. Um, the Nightmare Success podcast is sponsored by the White Collar Support Group,
Mm-hmm.
the world's first support group devoted to people navigating the white collar criminal justice system. I'm a member of the White Collar Support Group, and I can tell you that is a bunch of people who help each other through the criminal justice journey for free. Whether you're just starting your journey or you made it through to the other side, this is a great space for you. You can join us on Zoom Monday, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, 4 p.m. Pacific. For information, go to prisonist.org. That's prisonist.org. Start here. So I think it's interesting, Tara, that you were going through all this and you had these bad thoughts, but then you pull out this number of I'm going to call this law professor, and what what made you do that?
When I was in prison and those law students came, they told me, you should think about going to law school. And I thought they were crazy. I was like, I don't know any lawyers. They're all kind of like rich people who are not in like
Yeah,
not from my,
right. I don't relate to them.
yeah, I don't relate to them. And I've had public defenders who I didn't think were very good.
Uh-huh.
And so I, but they said, you could be lawyers like us, coming in and helping people in prison. I'm like, wow, really? And I didn't know about that, right?
Yeah.
And so they gave me a number and of the professor John Straight, and I wrote it down. And then I think it was the desperation of not seeing a way out of my circumstances because I
Hmm.
wasn't going to be able to find a better paying job with 9 felonies. Um, and everyone in my community, in my recovery community, also had criminal records, and they were also closed out of most jobs at the
Yep.
time. And this was in 2013. It was before Ban the Box and stuff like that. So, um,
Tara, I'm curious because you're in that world now with laws are made. The people that are around you that obviously don't have a record, do they know the barriers that we go through for reentry? I mean, is it an awareness with just actually the lawmakers themselves that they understand that it's a tough hill to climb?
I will say they did not know until I and some others really started getting active in Olympia in the Capitol
Yeah,
and started educating them.
yeah.
So when I
I
got
didn't mean to
out,
jump ahead of you there. I was
yeah,
just thinking
no, no,
that
yeah.
you're in that world, and it's people like you
Mm-mm.
that lend a voice to people who are actually making the laws. And I think sometimes it's not that they're doing something on purpose. I just don't know that they're aware of it.
Mhm.
What reminds me of that is Jay Jordan in California.
Yeah, I know him.
Um, he did a lot of work on a lot of laws. And one of the things that he did was create a wall,
Mhm.
and he took it up to the Sacramento and brought all the legislators out, and they looked at all these laws that were on the books that were barriers for people to not be able to get jobs or not to be able to have housing or not. And they looked at it in awe. They couldn't believe that there were that many barriers for someone
Mhm.
to get back into society and try to be a
Mhm.
citizen.
Mhm.
Anyway, I didn't mean to bring you off of the because the story of you going through law school and then it's a good one.
Yeah.
So I didn't mean to draw you off of that.
No, it's okay. No, it's okay. Thank you. Yeah, so I got admitted to law school. I applied. Sean Hopwood helped me with my personal essay entrance, and told me how to study for the LSAT and all that. And I got admitted about a year and 4 months after I got out of prison.
That's
Uh,
incredible.
yeah,
I'm
and it
trying to
was
think at that time, Tara, how old would you have been when you were going to enter law school?
I think it was like 35. It
Yeah.
was
Okay.
35.
Yeah.
And I was scared and I didn't think I was smart enough. I didn't know, in
Kind of the
any
whole imposter syndrome thing. Yeah.
all the imposter syndrome on steroids because I was also the only, formerly incarcerated person there,
Yep.
at least open about it.
Hmm.
And I remember, my first class was criminal law and just the language they were using, some of my colleagues, my peers, and the stigma.
Hmm.
And I remember just having like a lot of visceral responses, PTSD, like not staying in my body. I was very upset and dysregulated, and it was really hard to be there and get through that. But I found a lot of support outside of the law school, with civil rights organizations, advocacy organizations that were working on criminal justice. And so then I started going down to Olympia and sharing my story. And then as I did that, I was invited to speak at judicial conferences and all kinds of different policy
While
tables
you're in law school.
while I'm in law school.
Wow.
And the governor appointed me to become the co-chair of the statewide reentry council, which was brand new, and the public defense advisory board. And
What'd you think
um,
about that? I mean, at that time in your life, what was going through Tara's head? The governor is saying, "Hey, Tara, I'd like for you to work on something for me."
I mean, it was in, insane. It was like a movie. It was
Yeah.
like a movie. Here I go from, prison and the lowest point of my life. And now I'm up here and I'm being supported by these people outside the law school who are working on advocacy and who are trying to learn. And like you said, a lot of lawmakers don't know, but they want to learn. And
Yeah.
so I was getting in the ear of a lot of lawmakers and, you know, passed legislation before I ever got elected.
Yeah.
Several pieces of legislation by working with prime sponsors and starting a nonprofit that also helped elevate other people who have been formerly incarcerated. So we were stronger together in numbers. And yeah, I've been able to accomplish a lot in 10 years.
Well, it's unreal, but the story of you getting through law school, doing the things that you did, and graduating as high as you did in your law school class, did you just assume that your next step would be, I'm going to be admitted by the bar and be an attorney and go to work?
Absolutely. I mean, because Sean got admitted in Washington State 2 years before I graduated. And, you know, his criminal record was
This is a bank robbery.
Bank robbery. And he had served much longer time and he didn't have any mitigating circumstances like I did of childhood trauma, drug addiction, you know, all of that. And so, and, you know, when I applied, I had 100 letters of support from sitting judges, prosecutors, elected like legislators, people in my recovery community, people in my faith community, other formerly incarcerated people, law professors. You know, all of these people had written letters of support on my behalf. I graduated magna cum laude. I graduated with the first Skadden Fellowship ever in my school's history. And Skadden Fellowship's been around 30 years and people have been applying and nobody ever got one. And so you know, and this was going to fund my salary of like $52,000 a year, very, you know, modest salary to actually represent people coming out of prison in their legal issues around, you know, their fines and fees and when they can get their record vacated so they can get better job opportunities and trying to overcome these barriers to reentry. And so, you know, and that pro bono, that attorney, law professor who I had contacted before I applied, you know, took my case pro bono and represented me at the character and fitness hearing. And he had been doing that for like 35 years. And I don't think he ever lost a case. And he really believed that I was going to be okay because for the 5 years after prison, you know, I had been doing random drug testing in order to keep my nursing license active. I had done everything right. And it was extremely devastating when after a full day of hearing and a sitting judge came to testify on my behalf and a policy director from the ACLU who was my supervisor and another woman who I'd worked with, you know, and I answered all of their questions and then they come out and they say, we're sorry, but you know, 6-3, they've decided not to recommend that you get to sit for the bar exam. And I was devastated. I was shocked because I thought there's no way, like I've done everything right. And
well, I think this is what's interesting about your story though, Tarra, because there's really only two ways to go when something like that happens. You lose all hope, curl up in a fetal position and hit rock bottom and stay there. Or you do what you did. You were devastated by it. You couldn't believe it, but you continued to take steps and connect dots. What do you think that is? What, because I think people want to know because people get knocked down. It's the question of how they get back up. How did you get back up from that?
You know, I think just my whole life, my guiding light has been to give my kids a better life than I had. And so like giving up is not even an option.
It's not your thing.
It's not an option. You know, I made a mistake when I used drugs and I was separated from them for a couple of years and that was the worst thing ever. And so, yeah, just giving up, that's just not an option. You have to figure it out. And so for me, it's like, I think, you know, my therapist has always been trying to figure out like, my resilience? Where do I get resilience? Because if we could figure that out, we could like give it
Put
to
it in
other
a
people.
bottle and
Yeah, I want
sell
to
it
give
to
it to more
everybody.
people. I want everyone to have resilience, right?
Right.
And to not give up and to keep coming back.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it might have been protective factors from my grandmother, who, loved me, or my dedication to my children. But yeah, just giving up is not an option. And so one of the things that I have, a strength that I have, is that I'm vulnerable enough to reach out when I need help.
And that's a
And
huge thing.
and to keep finding, if I reach a person and they can't help me, that's not a dead end. I'll find another
No, and
way.
Tara, I don't want to gloss over that, because to me, I've got the 5 tools I used, to survive my nightmare. That's number one, is to humble yourself, look around, see who's getting it right, and go and ask them how they're getting it right. Ask them for advice, ask them for help. And it's amazing how many people will help you, because the people who are getting it right and the people that can help, they want to, and they're kind of proud that they're getting it right. And, I always say it's like getting the answers to the test before the test, because if you do that, and this is what I find fascinating about your story, you weren't afraid to do that. Because by doing everything right, you almost get that entitlement that, hey, I did everything I was supposed to do. Give me what I'm supposed to have. And you didn't get it. And you had everything that you were supposed to have, all the people, all the letters, all the support, all the things that you had done. And they said, no, 6-3, no. And I think that's the magic recipe right there, that, okay, now what? Okay, now what do I need to do? You didn't quit. And I think that's everybody has moments like that with the fork in the road. So take us through to what happened next.
Yeah. I mean, so, I was very fortunate that I had met Sean, previously, and that I had done 5 or 6 internships during my time in law school. And I had developed this network because, that the no decision came on a Friday, and it was Good Friday. And, I'm a spiritual person, and, Sunday was Easter, and I was like, going through it and thinking, but just trying to fill my spirit, saying the resurrection's going to come, and, all this. And then on Tuesday, there was a strategy meeting where Skadden Foundation Zoomed in, or, called in. It was conference calls with the ACLU and Sean Hopwood, and then my professor, who was my lawyer at the Character and Fitness, and like all these people. And they just started saying, like, we're not going to give up. There's no process for appeal, but we're going to figure it out. We're going to create, like, do a novel thing. And Sean decided to become my new lawyer. And
Big deal.
He's a Washington State licensed
Big deal.
attorney.
Yeah.
A Washington State licensed attorney, even though he's a Georgetown law professor. And so,
Right.
He filed, within like 30 days or whatever, he filed a motion before the Supreme Court, asking for a review of what happened at the Bar Association. And then as soon as he did that, the ACLU of Washington filed an amicus brief 15 minutes later with signatures from criminal justice organizations all across the nation.
That's awesome.
And like 54 law professors, all of these people. And so I think the court saw that and was like, whoa, this is like something we really need to pay attention to.
Take a look at this. Yes.
Because justices in our state are elected, and they're accountable, and they work with a lot of these people. And, I think they wanted to do the right thing. So they did. They scheduled it for oral argument, which had not happened previously in Washington.
Mm-hmm.
And then so Sean came from DC, and the Temple of Justice was packed. I mean, so packed that somebody fainted, and that it was so hot in there, right? And it was packed, and it was November, but they had to set up overflow outside, and
wow.
It was just insane. When Sean tells the story, he's like, people were coming up and taking selfies with me, and like NPR was there from DC, and like the media was everywhere.
Yeah, big deal.
It was a big deal. And so he did a great job in representing me. I go back and watch that hearing sometimes because he was just so great. And the justices, they were asking really good questions. You could tell that they were upset. Mm-hmm. But we left that day, and you think it takes like 4 or 5 months to get an opinion from the Supreme Court. So I thought I'd be waiting with anxiety another 4 or 5 months.
Sure.
And they gave me the greatest gift. And that day, the Supreme Court unanimously ordered that I take the bar exam. And it's still, it was the most validating form of justice that anyone could ever ask for. Unanimous decision in historical time, on the same day. They don't do that. Um, and Sean, didn't have to even say anything. They know that he's formally incarcerated, that he's been admitted. So it took 4 or 5 months for the opinion to come out, but it finally did say, we really think there was, some sexism in this case, and that the bar needs to do better. And I know that they've been trying really hard for many years now to make change and to move in the right direction on that board. So yeah, it was great.
And what I think is such a big deal about the story is that it wasn't just for you, Tarra. It affects everyone. And when someone like you does what you did, it's a ripple effect through the whole reentry community, that there's a voice that didn't give up and changed something. And that's why I want people to hear your story, because it's one that you didn't have to do that. You could have gone off and done something else. I maybe gone back to nursing or something, but you gritted it out and got it, and it became something. And now, it's something that you can talk about, and it inspires people to hopefully, this program is called Nightmare Success, and people always say, well, why did you put those two words together? Because every time you do life, those two words are together, because you got to decide if you're going to get out of your comfort zone, this ugly routine you're in, and step into the unknown. And you did that every time. You were stepping into the unknown every time. You had no idea what that court was going to do or say, but you put yourself out there. And I think that is it's great. I love it.
Thank you. And I think some people don't understand either that the bar really wanted to keep these proceedings closed hearing, closed record. They did not
want to
want
put light on everything.
Yeah, and we had to fight to make it open and transparent. And I was afraid at times. I said, but Sean, everyone's going to see all of the ugly of my past and my, mental health and my substance use, and all the details of my shameful past. And I was afraid at times. And he was like, yes, and if you waive this, that's the only way we'll get guidance for other law students in the future. And so I'm glad that people supported me emotionally through that, so I could make that decision. That was the best thing. I always wanted to do anything I did. It was to break barriers so others would also have, the fairness and the justice. And so I'm glad that I had the support to get through that, and that, I was learning to break free from shame. And so, yeah, it's good.
So you become an attorney.
Yes.
And then you step into another world.
Yeah. So, I never was politically active. I came from a family that didn't vote, right? I think the first time I voted, I don't know, I can't remember the year, but, I was probably in my 20s, like late 20s. It was just like, politics
Not
in
a thing.
Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? When you're struggling for housing and food, you can't really think about
priorities.
But yeah. And so, through my advocacy in Olympia, I got to know my representatives and my senator, and my representative, Sherry Appleton, bless her. I love her so much. She was a lobbyist for the defenders before she became a representative. And she was on the public safety committee and worked on criminal justice issues and became a supporter of mine. And so when I was in the Temple of Justice fighting to become a lawyer, she was there that day in the courtroom and had been a supporter of mine. And she tells me, she says, Tarra, I'm 77. I've got to retire. A lot of people wanted her to retire. They felt like she, wasn't keeping up, like she wasn't being as, much of a leader as she had been before. And so she says, I'm not going to retire unless you will run. And I said, oh no, there's no way. This is nuts. Like the things I've seen and the mudslinging and politics, and they'll just use my past against me. I don't want to run. Okay. At the same time, there was a state senator running over here who had supported my Supreme Court case, and she got a negative mailer sent out to all the homes in her district saying, don't vote for this Senator Emily Randall because she's soft on crime. She supports Tarra Simmons, a drug addicted ex-con who wasn't allowed to take the bar exam. And they sent that mailer out to the homes in her district, like to try and get people not to vote for her, to paint her as soft on crime because she supported me. And so, at that time I was like, you know what? They're going to talk about me whether I run or not.
No matter what.
And then, Sherry and others, like people were telling me, Tara, there's no other person that has an actual order from the Supreme Court saying they are a person of good moral character.
Good point.
Good point. And you've already been so transparent about everything. Yeah. So they can't use it against you because you've already
own it. Yeah.
And you know what? There wasn't a lot of people in our movement nationally who were lined up that had the privilege that I had with all of the support from the incumbent who was retiring.
That's huge.
A Supreme Court case saying I was a good person, already transparent nationally in media. And I felt like if I didn't do it, who was ever going to be able to break that concrete ceiling and get to that platform where I can share and, get our message out and normalize people like us to get into office. And if you look at the history of social movements, there was always one woman that had to go first, who had to start saying women can be leaders, right?
So true.
Or one person of color, or one person that had a different sexual orientation, or an immigrant or a refugee, historically. And so as far as I know, I am one of the very first in the nation who's been to prison, who then got elected at a state legislature. And now I've been supporting other people across the country. And so, Eddie Gibbs is in New York, and Keturah Heron is in Kentucky, and Cherie Cruz and Leola.
I think you said there's 5 or 6 that you're working with.
Yeah.
I love that.
And John Scott is the Speaker of the House in Virginia.
I saw that. Do you know him?
I do. I had
I need to have him on the show. He's got an incredible story.
Yeah, I saw him in DC a few months ago. So, we are connected. We are, trying to help others.
Yeah.
I am looking at creating a 501c3 and a 501c4 for the purposes of helping people nationally who are justice impacted. I get emails and letters all the time.
Sure.
And the problem is I want to also help others, but I only am one person. Yeah. And so building a team is what I need to do in order to answer all of that.
But the great thing is Tara, it was another situation. I don't know anything about it, but I'm going to try it. I'm going to step out. It's the unknown. You had the right support, but you got it. First time elected. Now I'm sure you're up for election again. But you, and now you've become such a great voice for so many different things, like we talked about earlier, introducing people to the world of the unknown, the reentry world, and incarceration, and all the different things that surround that.
Yeah.
So it's and I know you talked about a lot of other things too, healthcare and things that you do, but and I know there's a lot of responsibility that goes with all that. You are a great voice, role model to be talking about things that are so important, that there's such a strong negative narrative that you're breaking through that piece by piece, piece by piece, piece by piece. And it's a big deal. So what's, you're getting, let's see, you're up for election.
Right now I am.
Right now.
In November. So this will be my 3rd election that I'm going to win. It's not as difficult.
Well, I think you won by 68% or something last time, right?
Yeah. And
so
the
you've
first
done a
time.
good job.
So the first and second time, the first one was the most difficult because there were several, Democrats that were running in an open seat. And one was a sitting city councilwoman for 20 years, and I was new in politics. And so it was difficult, but I won. And that was in 2020. And then I got reelected in 2022, and now I'm up again. Every 2 years we run. But I am, we're a part-time citizen legislature. We are looking at going to more of a full-time. It's hard to find work that you can like do part-time and then leave during session. And because
Yeah.
session is all consuming. It's not a glamorous life. It's not a life you will make money on, but it is a purposeful life. And it's always a balance trying to figure out how to, supplement my income and all of that. I've been pretty fortunate so far, but this is why it's hard for people from our kind of backgrounds to get into politics because, especially the structure here where it's a part-time citizen legislature. But I've been able to do so many great things for our people. I mean, millions, hundreds of millions of dollars
Yes.
has been redirected to reentry in my state, nonprofits. Like
It's just huge.
that was never happening before I got elected. My first freshman bill restored the right to vote for people as soon as they exit prison, even if they're in jail, if they're in a halfway house, a work release, even if they're on community custody, even if they have fines and fees. Doesn't matter as long as your head isn't on a 24-hour state issued prison pillow.
Yep.
You're voting the next day.
I love that.
I make sure people now are released with a 6-month housing voucher, no matter what. Everyone, you're not going home homeless anymore.
That's huge.
I have abolished all mandatory fines and fees unless it is restitution to an actual victim. I've removed some barriers for us to get into healthcare jobs because if I need a caregiver and my son has a robbery or a murder charge, I should still be able to choose that he's my caregiver.
Yep.
And getting paid for that. So, it's, I've been
those are all big things you just said, Tarra. Those are monumental things because those are the things that cycle people back when they didn't want to be back. It just cycled them back. And those things, because you went through it, those are big things.
Yeah, I absolutely do. And I've been working on conditions. I've got the guys in prison and women in prison a raise finally for their labor. I've been working to get it even more, but I've just been able to do a lot of things around conditions and reentry. I've been working really hard on sentencing reform. I feel like I'm really close on one of my bills that would allow a second look for people doing long sentences. But that is the hardest one is sentencing reform, especially retroactive sentencing reform.
Well, and I think there's some things on the federal side through the CARES Act where you can look at some of those great statistics now to see what's happened when people have gone home to home confinement and the recidivism is real low. And there's reasons why that can work both state and federal. And hopefully they don't change anything on the federal side because they keep bouncing back and forth on that. But
I know. Yeah.
Tarra, if I was going to ask you because it's always interesting to hear somebody who's gone through what you've gone through and how you've gone through it. What do you think is your biggest takeaway through all this?
I think it's just never give up.
That's a big one.
If you can dream it, you can be it. There's always a way, always. So even if I wanted to be a nurse or a doctor and I wasn't able to vacate my record, I could go for a pardon from the governor. People don't, and you don't know what you don't know. And so keep reaching out. Don't give up. Ask other people because it is true. A lot of our people just don't have access to the information. They don't even know.
They don't know.
They don't know that they could be a lawyer. They don't know that they could be a doctor. They don't know, but don't ever give up on your dreams or let some man-made law stop you because laws are made to be changed.
So true. And there you sit. And I don't know, can you talk about what's next for you?
I mean, yeah, I don't have a lot of ambition or desire to go to DC to be in Congress. I just don't really. I love being here local in my community. People have asked me to run for, a statewide office like governor or something. I don't have that desire either. I, potentially would go into the Senate position here in my district when my seatmate, exits that. Outside of that, I want to continue to do work to help elevate other people who have been incarcerated as well into positions of power, whether that's becoming lawyers or getting elected to offices. I really want there to be representation across America in the state houses, because that's where a lot of the
That could
census
be
laws.
huge. That's how the voice happens, is
Yeah,
connecting all those voices together and become one voice to be able to make real change.
yeah. Because what I've noticed is that, when I get to know my colleagues and then
Mm-hmm.
issues come up, they listen to me and they become educated. They don't know what they don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't know about, women needing menstrual material in prison and how we
Mm-hmm.
have to pay for it, or they just don't know the little things. And
Yeah.
when they find out, they're like, "Oh my gosh, we're going
It
to change
should be
that."
different.
So
Yeah.
just being there, my presence has really
Yeah.
made a difference. So I want that across the state, across the nation.
And I think it can happen. And I think it should happen because I get to interview a lot of people across the nation. There's all kinds of pockets everywhere. Michigan's got some great stuff going. Connecticut's got all these different states. And if we could connect it all, that's where the power comes from, with the voice.
Mm-hmm.
And it's people like you, Tara, that are making that happen.
Mm-hmm.
So don't stop doing that. We just need to bottle you up, duplicate you, clone you, and then we'll be good.
That's what I need as a team, because I do try to keep us connected, like the
Yeah,
formerly incarcerated. I'm like the leader and the convener. I've got them coming out, in September to go
I
do
love
prison
it.
tours. But there might be others out there who I don't know about, and like I want
Absolutely.
them to be connected to a space, and then all of us working together to kind of help others get into the spaces and having some support. So that's kind of what I'm dreaming about right now.
I love it. Um, it's just all good stuff. For And did you say you're working on a book?
I am. I have a complete proposal and some sample chapters, and I'm shopping
When's
agents right
when
now.
do you think that'll be part of your world out there?
I would imagine within the next year.
Okay.
I have the extended outline drafted. I could
I,
finish it myself, but I'm
yeah,
also kind of shopping agents right now to see if I can get,
it'll be incredible.
with a publishing
Incredible
house.
book, incredible movie. If
Hmm.
anybody else is looking for a book out there, I've got one that's already out there while you're waiting for Tara's. It's Nightmare Success. It's on Barnes and Noble, Walmart. I want to thank Homestead Financial. They let me use all this stuff in here and we had a little bit of a problem today with Tara. It put me in a cold sweat. I couldn't get my microphone to work. So what do we have? Like 3 or 4 minutes there of just a cold sweat of Brett Cassidy. Um, eh, People, gosh, please follow, subscribe, like, comment. It means a lot to the show. Also, those Apple's reviews, they mean a lot. If you want to find about me, it's brentcassidy.com. I spell it wrong. It's with a TY, not a DY. And as I used to say when I was writing my emails back and forth from Leavenworth, stay strong. I'll do the same. Tarra Simmons, you are incredible. Thank you so
Thank
much for being
you.
on today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and thanks for all you do to help and inspire others too.
I appreciate that. Nightmare Success, in and out.
Mhm.